Hello, I'm Kerry Thomas. Thank you for joining me today. What I'd like to share with you is not simply a perspective on horses, but a way of seeing them. Because in our industry, we often ask what a horse can do, how it performs, how it moves, how it behaves, but far less often do we ask a much more important question. What does this life feel like to the horse living in it? Because the horse is not a machine, it is not a product, it is not a thing we look at. Though there is undeniable artistry within them. We can all agree on that. The horse is much more than that, though. It is a sentient emotional being, one that feels, processes, adapts, and responds to the world we place it in. Yet the way we organize our thinking, breeding, training, performance, suggests that these are separate stages, separate responsibilities. And when the time comes for aftercare, while an important conversation, it is often a response that comes too late because welfare has been chasing the stages of our organized thinking when it should never have had to in the first place. To the horse, these are not separate phases. They are lived continuously throughout the horse's lifetime. And that life is experienced moment by moment through the lens of how the horse perceives the world around it. This brings us to an important question. How do we define welfare from the horse's perspective? Not from ours, but from the horse's perspective. A view from the hoof, if you will. When we speak of welfare, we often speak of standards, of practices, of responsibilities, but the truth is often much simpler and much more important. Implemented properly, welfare is not something we give to the horse. It is something the horse experiences through the world we create for it. And that experience does not begin in training, nor does it begin when the horse enters a discipline or a performance. It begins at the very start and follows the horse for the rest of its life. It begins with the mindset, our mindset. And though that trail is often compartmentalized by us, there are no separately defined stages for the horse. They are experienced as life itself, the big picture. Within that experience, we often find there is a gap between our expectations and the horse's capacity to fill them, often an unfair expectation. And this is where what we can call an industry gap begins to reveal itself, or at least that's what I call it. You see, the challenge we face today is not a lack of care, it is not a lack of effort. The real challenge, as I see it, is a lack of understanding. We have built systems around disciplines and performance outcomes and the expectations we place upon them. But too often, those systems are built without a clear understanding of how the horse actually experiences them. And when that happens, we begin to see behavioral interruptions or reactions as problems, problem horse, instead of recognizing them as emotionally driven expressions. They are emotionally driven expressions. Whether nervous reaction or purposeful response, both expressions are forms of communication. What's the horse telling us? But instead of listening and differentiating between these, we often rush to judgment and begin to manage outcomes instead of understanding causes. We're very good at managing the outcomes, sometimes not so good at understanding the cause. We must guard ourselves against being too quick to manage behavior through reckless interventions, whether they be chemical or mechanical, and first begin asking a deeper question. Why is the behavior happening in the first place? Because there is a very fine line between training and trauma. I'm going to say that again. There's a very fine line between training and trauma. We cannot treat an emotional impulse with a physical tool or chemical solution and expect sustained, meaningful results. When we do, we may mask what is happening, but we do not resolve it. And in so doing, we risk allowing sensory and behavioral inefficiencies to go unrecognized and unmanaged properly, with the added risk of those being carried forward into our breeding decisions. I often say about breeding, you are breeding who the horse is, not what the horse has done. This is where equine welfare and risk management merge with Mother Nature. because behavioral genetic expression does not follow our rules, it follows the laws of nature. And it is our responsibility to understand the horse's nature, not the horse's responsibility to understand ours. Let us not forget that if we are not working with the natural herd dynamics, we are working against them. It's an uphill battle. So the question at hand is, where does true understanding actually begin? Well, at the core of every horse lies the answer, and it is found within what I call their operating system. It is a system designed by nature, tethered to the herd, and unchanged by man, though we often try. And while the environments we place them in have changed dramatically over time, and pedigree has helped guide the sculpting of the physical horse, we will always find that we cannot machine emotion. We cannot machine emotion. Their behavioral genetic code is built on two things: herd dynamics and sensory soundness. This is how the horse understands the world, how it communicates, how it assigns meaning to association, manages stress and movement, how it perceives space, and engages in relationship and with each other, ourselves, and their environment. 3 parts of that relationship. The processing sequence is constant and ever vigilant, surveying for subtleties and connected to the matrix of the herd structure. This puts demands upon us that we cannot afford to be complacent or apathetic in our attentiveness and our care of our horses. Because the sensory system is not only responsible for perception, it is responsible for assimilation and ultimately adaptation. 2 distinct processes from an equine perspective. You see, assimilation is formed through the emotional environment. Assimilation is emotional, psychological. Adaptation is developed through the physical demands within that environment. So adaptation is the physical training, the sculpting of the body, how the body adapts to those changes. It is led by the psychology, though. It is led by the emotional experience of the horse that paves the way for the body to move through. If we do not recognize the difference between these two, we cannot understand the importance of addressing both independently and together. We often put the body ahead of the mind of the horse. We enjoy the psychology of the horse, we enjoy their personalities, but we work to sculpt and train and prepare the body without preparing the mind, when in reality, the mind, the psychology, the sensory efficiency has to clear the space for the body to move through effectively without a lot of stress. The environment, therefore, is not a backdrop to lived experience. It is an active participant in the horse's psychological and emotional development. And we are responsible for, and a big part of that, and accountable to, both the emotional and the physical environment that we create. One that remains constant, well, one truth, I should say, that remains constant. We do not erase instinct, even if we fail to truly embrace its existence. Cannot erase instinct. This brings us to technology, progress, and the responsibility inherently within that. So as our industry continues to evolve, we are seeing rapid advancements in technology, infrastructure, and data. And these advancements hold tremendous potential, for sure, but they also carry a responsibility. We cannot forget that part. They carry a responsibility. We can't let our excitement of what we can create get ahead of what's been created. Because the evaluation of behavior is not found solely in the physical expression we see. Behavior begins as an emotional impulse long before it ever becomes a visible reaction, a visible action. And no matter how advanced technology becomes, it can only measure what is expressed, not fully define what is felt. And that distinction matters, because without behavioral context, without an understanding of herd dynamics and sensory soundness, technology can become disconnected from the very being it is meant to serve. This is an important part to remember. Technology must never outrun the horse's lived experience. Technology must never outrun the horse's lived experience. Because when it does, we risk designing systems that make sense to us that cannot make sense of the horse's lived experience. We must defend against the risk of measuring performance without understanding perception, of collecting data without understanding meaning. Technology should not be burdened with defining emotional context, but rather add depth to it. It should support it. It should refine it. It should align with it. Because if it does not, then no matter how advanced technology becomes, it will remain fundamentally misaligned with the life of the horse living within it. Now, put a little context on this. I'm going to offer you a little understanding through an analogy. So let me put it this way. If we're driving down the road, our senses are constantly clearing space ahead of us, creating a cushion for us, allowing us to move forward with confidence and consistency, this consistent pace, a good rhythm. But if we suddenly enter a patch of fog, our perception becomes shorter, right? Our space becomes smaller. And without thinking, we slow down, not because we want to, but because we have to. It's an automatic response, a direct, a direct reflection of how perception and sensory perception shapes the world. So now it's become smaller. Even though the world is the same size, our perception of it is smaller because of the fog. And yes, technology can measure the result of that decision. It cannot measure the reasoning behind it. And the same is true for the horse. But often we do not recognize the fog straining their sensory system. And instead of asking why the horse is slowing down, hesitating, or reacting, we may ask the horse to move forward anyway. Just get through it. Come on, you've been here before. I don't understand why you're pausing here yet again and again and again, pushing beyond natural thresholds and manageable tolerances. Again, the fine line between training and trauma. And we cannot let technology convince us this is the right path because we lack context to measure against data. It's all about reframing the system, in my point of view. And if we truly accept that our horses' unique personalities are what endears us to them, and who doesn't say that our horses are driven by emotion, we all feel it, then we must also accept something else. Equine welfare is not a luxury. It cannot be compartmentalized. It cannot be applied only at certain stages out of convenience or optics, nor added into the system after the fact as a response or out of a perceived necessity. It must be built into the system itself, at the very core, not as an accessory, but as a foundation, which means equine welfare should not be formed around disciplines. We should not create a discipline and try to fit a welfare into it. It doesn't work that way. Disciplines must be forged from out of welfare. Welfare first, discipline second. Horse first, discipline second. It's common sense. And policy itself must be shaped by the horse's lived experience, not implemented as a rescue effort because it makes us feel good. It should not be implemented after the experience has already been compromised. It's too late. We have to think about the horse's entire life. How prepared are they going to be to move past the discipline into other stages when their performance and their time is up for that? Not every horse is going to the breeding shed. To me, education is the path forward. And again, this brings us to what I think is one of the most important pieces of the puzzle is education, because education is the underwriter of understanding. And yet, in working with horses, sentient beings with complex social structures and highly developed sensory systems, we frequently rely on assumption, often guided by the phrase, "This is how it's always been done." But when understanding lacks depth, there is little room to question the way things have always been against the way they actually are. This must change, because without foundational education in herd dynamics, herd structure, sensory soundness, we are asking people to navigate a world they do not yet fully understand. And if welfare is truly to matter, then we must recognize where it begins, not in training, not in performance, but at the very start, in the breeding shed. Because while we often speak of breeding in terms of discipline, in reality, we are breeding for an entire life. A life that will experience environments, relationships, stress, and change. A life that must be malleable, understandable, and able to connect long after any single purpose we assign. And so the question becomes not just what the horse can do, but how the horse will experience the life we ask it to live. We circle back to that time and again because it's really important for us not to lose sight of that main point. Because in so doing, we find ourselves back to where we began. Welfare is not something we add to the horse's life. It is something the horse experiences through the life we create and that we manage. And if we do not understand how that life is experienced, then we cannot truly claim to provide welfare. Thank you for joining me today. And though this conversation may come to a close, I hope it serves as a beginning, a new way of seeing, some new thoughts, and some new conversations. Thank you for your time.